Looking at it from the resident's point of view, the whole point of having any affordable housing requirement at all is to provide affordable housing. So if you've got as far as the levy in lieu, there's already been a degree of failure because you're getting money rather than housing. We recognise that the policies do require exceptional circumstances before you move first to off-site provision and then to payments in lieu. We would like to see the requirement of exceptionability more rigorously applied. We think that the City Council too readily sometimes accepts that something is not possible, and in that regard we would welcome a carefully thought through payment in lieu scheme that more accurately reflected the actual cost to the developer of providing or not providing the affordable housing on site. Because where there is a very broad brush scheme, there is an obvious incentive to want to find reasons not to provide the affordable housing on site and either to provide it off site or to provide a payment in lieu, because that may make a very real saving for the developer, quite aside from making the development as a whole more commercially attractive. If there is going to be a payment in lieu or provision off-site in other than very exceptional circumstances, we would invite the City Council to consider a policy whereby more was required. So, for example, if you wish to develop a site that would usually require 10 units of affordable housing to be provided, we could quite see a policy would be attractive all round that permitted the developer not to provide those 10 there, but required them to provide instead 15 nearby. What we don't find attractive is 10 for 10, providing ghetto development and moving the affordable housing out and defeating the mixed-use policy in the first place.
Thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts on that. I think the first point is on the word land value. I think it's really important that we get our terminology clear for the future. There's very little true land in Westminster apart from one or two sites. Paddington's largely developed, one or two others. So I would suggest that, and this has been debated elsewhere, that market value is the key criterion. And in that context, although I recognise the comments just made, the question is how do you create the incentive to undertake the residential development in the first place from, as we discussed last week or the week before, a fully functioning existing Class B1 office building that could continue in perpetuity for offices. If you want to incentivise a residential development, you can't disregard the market value of the existing fixed asset. So the question becomes, how, if you want the residential to go forward, that's all residential of all tenures. And it's really in that point, I think, where this debate kicks in. So I think it's a complex area. I think your question probably has to go into broader context, bearing in mind also that I think PPS 3 specifically asks for affordable housing policies to be subject to viability testing as well. So I think there's quite a process actually to work this through in a way that could be made to work to make sure the residential homes you're seeking do actually come forward.
Thank you. Were there any other comments on housing or affordable housing payments in lieu? Yes, the gentleman here.
I think we totally subscribe to what Hugh's just been saying. I think the only reinforcement to that in one particular case is about the relaxation probably for off-site affordable and the tests therein that I know for several schemes that we've just been negotiating is that they've obviously been in the vicinity. I think what we'd like to see is probably in the wider district area within Westminster, and I think we take cognizance of the point. I think I mean 1-for-1 or a greater number if it's in a further afield, and that I think if the land value from a development perspective can be weighed up, then we can still secure for you the delivery of more numbers, but only if there's latitude in the policy to, provide that flexibility.
Okay, thank you. And gentleman, Matthew Bennett.
I'd be a bit worried about that last comment because it's quite difficult to provide housing in areas like Soho, Mayfair, Covent Garden, and it's expensive. And if, with its housing hat on, Westminster thought that it might get 11 units or 12 units, or let alone 15 units, somewhere else, as a housing authority, it might be quite tempted to do that. But in terms of wanting to keep balanced and mixed-use communities, and the whole sort of underlying thing is of, as people have said, incentivising people to transfer out of B1 into C3, I think wherever possible it should be provided on-site or as close to, and not in the wider district. Otherwise, I can see an awful lot of housing going into, possibly Harrow Road or somewhere or other for a development which takes place right in the central area. And I think that sort of is ticking a box, but not really in line with the spirit of the policy that you're trying to address. So I hope you keep, wherever possible, on-site provision.
Okay, thank you. Were there any further comments about in lieu payments for affordable housing and indeed this sort of wider area of provision of affordable housing or housing against mixed use?